All right, this program is going to be about, strangely enough, arrays. And an array is a data structure that allows you to have more than one value stored in that data structure. So one of the first things that we need to be able to do is declare an array. And you do that by choosing the data type that you want the array to be. In this case, I have an int, and then you have this square bracket, which is not ultimately obvious unless you take it apart, and then we'll put it back together again. And then the name of the array. So this is going to be an int called num1, and then I have a system.out.println. But if I try to compile this, I get an error because, if I pull this up, it says that num may not have been initialized. So we can declare the array, but we have to initialize the array before we can do anything with it. So if I take these two out and save it, now I'm going to say int with my open close brackets indicating that this will be an array. I've called it numbers. And now our constructor new, and it's going to be an int array of 10 items. And to save us the grief here, I've said system.out.println, and it gives me that I have a square bracket indicating its array, a capital I indicating its integers, and then a memory address. So whereas it's perfectly happy with this, if I compile that, I have no errors. Now let's try one other thing just for fun, because that's trying to print the entire array. If I want to print a single item, let's take this. If I take this and put in square brackets and a number, that's saying what I want to print out is the first item in my array, indicating that array counting starts at 0. And what we find out is that there's my value. So that the value stored in this array at position 0 is 0. Well, that should not surprise us because we know that with ints, until the variable is given a value, it's initialized at 0. This is like trying to print out any other object, that when we had any object, if we tried to print it as opposed to a value associated with it, all you get is a memory address. So we can declare an array, and what we have to do is declare the type, in this case int. I give it a name. I say new int, and then this is how many values I'm going to store in the array. So indicating that counting starts at 0, I should have array items 0 through 9, which gives me a total of 10 elements in the array. Now I can, let's get rid of that, I can declare an array of ints and then fill it, and this will have again 10 items. But again, if I try and print this, I'm going to simply get a memory location. So this isn't very useful at this point. All right, that's not particularly useful at this point. I want to be able to get out each of these values. Well, as we did before, I can print out int num equals this. So whatever value is stored in numbers 2 at position 0 will be put in num, and I can print it out. Or I could have put numbers 2 square bracket with a 0 inside, and I would get a 0. Now, if I want to get all of the elements, this sounds like a job for a loop, and we'll do that in a second. But we're trying to set the limits for our loop. So to set the limits for the loop, I need the length of the array, the length being how many items are stored in it. So int length equals numbers2.length. Oh, notice that there is no set of parentheses. This is the difference between the length of a string and the length of an array. Length for strings is a method, and it is not a method, it is a attribute of an array. So in this case, when I have int length equals numbers2.length, and I print that out, I get 10, because I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 items, but it starts at 0. Oh, goody. So here's what we're going to do. We want to print them all out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a for loop for I equals 0 to I less than the number of items in the array. So it's less than length. And then I will increment I, and then I can print out numbers to I. And I'm putting, because I'm doing this as a print rather than print line, I'm going to have a space afterwards, and I will get all 10 items. Since I'm starting at 0 and going to less than 10, I will get all of the items. And then I'm going to put in a print line so I get a new line afterwards. I just didn't want, I wanted all this printed out on one line, and then I want a fresh line to start over with. Now, I can declare an int array called numbers3 that's going to be a new array of ints that's going to have 10 items. And I'm now going to say for int I equals 0 to I less than the length of the array, I plus plus. The length of the array is going to be 10 because I have declared that it is of size 10. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say numbers3i is going to be 3 times I. So I is my counter. So it's going to go 0 through 9. And then 3 times 0 is 0, 3 times 1 is 3, etc. And so when I now print this out, I should get 0, 3, 6, 9, 12, etc. So I can fill an array with numbers by using a for loop, or I can print the array out using a for loop. Now, how about just for fun at this point, since I do have more things I want to do, but just for fun, why don't you... All right, so what I'm going to ask you to do is to make 2 arrays of type double, and I want you to fill one hard coding it. That is, you're going to put in a set of numbers for however many you want. And let's say, so that we don't have puny loops, at least 10 items per array. So you're going to have at least 10 items in each of the arrays. You're going to fill one hard coding and one using a for loop, as I did, and then you're going to print out each one using a for loop for each. In other words, as opposed to Well, each of the arrays will have its own for loop for printing. How's that? Okay. All right, so that should give you a place to start.